I've always hated traveling at night. There's something about the darkness outside the windows that makes me uneasy. It feels like the world ends just beyond the glass. But that Friday, I had no other choice. My shift at the warehouse ran longer than expected. By the time I clocked out, the last bus home was my only option. It was scheduled to leave at exactly 11 p.m. I remember checking my watch as I walked into the terminal. The air inside smelled faintly of stale coffee and floor cleaner. A vending machine hummed in the corner, the sound echoing in the otherwise silent space. Only a few people sat scattered across the waiting area, most of them half asleep, staring at their phones. I scanned the large timetable on the wall. My bus was listed as Route 47, North Valley. I'd taken Route 47 before, but never this late at night. The bus stop outside was shrouded in mist, the street lights glowing weakly through the fog. My footsteps felt too loud on the tile floor. I bought a bottle of water from the vending machine. The clink of the bottle dropping startled me more than it should have. I was tired, maybe even a little lightheaded. The digital clock above the ticket counter read 10:52 p.m. 8 minutes to spare. I made my way to the far end of the terminal, where the night buses usually departed. The air grew colder as I approached the sliding doors. Outside, I could make out the shadow of a bus waiting. Its headlights were dim, barely cutting through the fog. I hesitated before stepping out. The cold hit me instantly, my breath forming small clouds in front of me. I walked toward the bus. The driver was standing beside it, leaning against the side panel. He wore a dark cap pulled low over his eyes. His uniform looked worn and frayed at the edges. He didn't smile when he saw me. "Route 47, I asked. He nodded once, his eyes hard to read in the shadows. I handed him my ticket. He tore the stub without a word. "Boarding starts now," he muttered. I stepped up into the bus. The interior smelled faintly of damp fabric. The seats were old, patterned in dull blues and grays. A dim yellow light glowed from the ceiling. Only a handful of passengers were inside. I noticed a woman in the front row, clutching a large purse. Two men sat apart near the middle. A young guy with headphones stared out the window. Nobody looked up as I passed. I chose a seat about halfway down the aisle. The cushions sagged slightly under my weight. I placed my backpack on the empty seat beside me. Outside, the fog swirled under the streetlights. I could barely see the terminal building anymore. The driver climbed into his seat. The engine coughed to life with a low rumble, the sound vibrating through the floor beneath my feet. He adjusted the mirrors without glancing back at us. The doors closed with a hiss, and slowly we rolled away from the curb. The terminal lights faded behind us. I leaned my head against the window, the glass cold against my skin. Streetlights passed in rhythmic flashes. I tried to relax, maybe even sleep. The ride home usually took about 2 hours, but this time felt different already. The city streets emptied quickly as we drove. I realized we weren't heading toward the main highway yet. Instead, we were taking smaller side roads. The fog thickened the farther we went, clinging to the bus like wet cloth. I could feel the damp chill seeping through the window. My reflection stared back at me in the glass. I didn't like the way my face looked in that dim light, pale, almost lifeless. I rubbed my eyes. Maybe it was just the fatigue. I told myself not to overthink it. Outside, the streetlights grew fewer and farther apart. Darkness filled the spaces between them. The sound of the engine became the only constant. I glanced at the driver. His posture was stiff, hands gripping the wheel tightly. He didn't hum or whistle like some drivers did. He didn't even glance at the road signs. I checked my watch again. Only 15 minutes had passed, but it already felt like an hour. My chest felt heavy for no reason. I shifted in my seat, trying to shake it off. But deep down, I already knew. This wasn't going to be a normal trip. Not at all. The bus moved slowly through the city streets. the fog swallowing the light from every passing lamp. My seat vibrated with the hum of the engine, steady but somehow strained, like the machine itself didn't want to be out here this late. I pulled my jacket tighter around me. The air inside was cooler than I expected, almost damp. The driver didn't turn on the radio. The only sounds were the low growl of the engine and the occasional squeak of the old suspension. I watched the back of his head, the way he leaned forward slightly as though he were peering through something more than just mist. The woman in the front row adjusted her purse, glancing toward the aisle for just a moment before looking away. Her eyes were dark and tired, her expression unreadable. I wondered how far she was traveling. One of the men in the middle seats yawned loudly, stretching his arms before settling back in. The younger passenger, with the headphones, kept his gaze fixed on the window, though I noticed his leg bouncing nervously. The bus took a turn down a narrower street. The lamps here were spaced far apart, and in the stretches of darkness between them, the fog became a wall. Every time we emerged into another circle of light, I caught glimpses of closed storefronts, rusted fences, and empty intersections. I realized we still hadn't reached the main highway. This wasn't the usual route, at least not the one I remembered. I leaned toward the window, trying to catch sight of a street sign, but the glass was streaked with moisture. The driver's hand stayed locked at 10 and 2. His head didn't move, not even to check the mirrors. I felt the urge to say something, ask if this was still Route 47, but something about the stiffness in his posture kept me silent. A faint rattling noise came from somewhere above my seat. I looked up and saw a loose panel vibrating with each bump in the road. The sound was small, but in the silence of the bus, it was constant and irritating. The young man with headphones suddenly took them off. He glanced around, then frowned. "Hey," he called toward the driver. "Isn't the highway back that way?" The driver didn't respond. The kid looked at me, eyebrows raised. I gave a small shrug, unsure what else to do. The fog outside thickened until the view was just a smear of white. The street lamps were gone now, replaced by the occasional flash of headlights from some other vehicle far away. But each time I looked for them again, they were gone. The woman in the front row shifted uncomfortably. I noticed her grip on the purse had tightened. The man in the middle cleared his throat and muttered something under his breath. We passed a gas station, its lights flickering. It looked abandoned. The pumps rusted, the glass doors clouded with dirt. For a moment, I thought I saw a figure standing inside, watching us pass. But as the fog rolled back in, the building vanished into the white. I adjusted my position, trying to shake off the unease creeping into my chest. My backpack felt heavier than before, even though I hadn't moved it. The driver finally slowed, making a sharp turn onto an even narrower road. The pavement here was cracked, and I could hear gravel pinging against the undercarriage. I realized I didn't recognize this area at all. The young man with the headphones stood up slightly, leaning over the seat in front of him. "Sir, is this still Route 47? His voice was louder this time, more insistent. The driver spoke for the first time since we left the terminal. "Sit down," he said flatly, without looking back. The young man hesitated, then sat again, shaking his head. The bus groaned as it climbed a small incline. Outside, the fog seemed to cling to the glass, sliding past in slow, heavy waves. I rubbed at the window with my sleeve, but it only smeared the moisture. The air inside felt colder now, and I could see faint puffs of breath from my mouth. No one else seemed to notice, or maybe they were pretending not to. I took out my phone, hoping to check the map. No signal. The screen showed only a small red X where the bars should be. I frowned, holding it higher, but the result was the same. The kid with the headphones tried his own phone, then glanced at me. "You too?" he asked quietly. I nodded. The woman in the front row turned slightly, her voice low but sharp. Best not to ask questions. Her eyes met mine for just a second, and there was something there I couldn't place. Fear, maybe, or warning. The driver took another turn, and the bus creaked under the strain. The seats rattled, the loose panel above me buzzing louder. My skin prickled. I leaned back, suddenly wishing I'd taken a different bus. I stared down the aisle toward the driver. The glow from the dashboard barely lit his hands on the wheel. Beyond that, the road was just a tunnel of fog, swallowing everything ahead. The kid put his headphones back on, though I noticed there was no sound coming from them. He was listening, just like I was, listening to the way the engine seemed to labor harder with each mile, as though we were climbing higher than we should be. Somewhere behind me, a seat creaked. I turned, expecting to see someone shifting position, but no one was moving. The man in the middle row was staring straight ahead, unblinking. I looked back at the window, but the reflection that met my eyes didn't look quite right. My own face seemed darker, the features slightly blurred, as if the glass wasn't showing exactly what was there. The rattling above grew louder. My pulse quickened. Outside, the fog began to thin in patches, revealing shapes along the roadside. Tall, thin figures, motionless, watching as we passed. I told myself they were trees, just trees in the mist. But deep down, I wasn't sure anymore. The road beneath the bus no longer felt like pavement. The steady hum of rubber on asphalt had turned into a dull, uneven thud, as if the tires were rolling over something softer, something that gave slightly with each rotation. I gripped the armrest, leaning closer to the aisle to get a better view ahead. The fog began to glow faintly, not with the yellow warmth of streetlights, but with a pale bluish shimmer that seemed to come from nowhere. It clung to the sides of the bus like wet fabric, bending and twisting as if alive. The driver's posture hadn't changed. His hands were locked on the wheel, his head still facing forward. I tried to see his face in the small rearview mirror above him, but the glass reflected only darkness, as though the mirror itself refused to show him. The man in the middle row finally spoke, his voice barely more than a whisper. "We're not supposed to be here." No one answered. The woman in the front row had her eyes closed, lips moving silently as though she were praying. The young man with the headphones had taken them off again, his hands resting tensely on his knees. I glanced out the window and felt my stomach drop. The tall shapes we had seen before were still there, pacing us on both sides of the road. They were closer now, their outlines sharp against the glowing mist. They moved without sound, gliding rather than walking, their heads turning slowly in our direction. The bus hit a bump, and for a moment, the lights inside flickered. In that flash, I thought I saw one of the shapes pressed against the glass. Its face, or what should have been a face, blank and featureless. When the light steadied again, there was only fog. The rattling from above had grown into a metallic scraping, like something dragging its nails along the roof. I craned my neck upward, heart pounding. Whatever it was, it moved slowly from the front of the bus toward the back, the sound growing fainter as it traveled. The kid finally stood up, taking a few steps down the aisle toward the driver. "Sir, we need to turn around. This isn't..." The bus lurched violently to the side, throwing him against the seats. He caught himself, eyes wide, and stumbled back to his seat. The driver hadn't flinched. Through the windshield, the road seemed to stretch and twist unnaturally, curving in ways that made no sense. The glowing fog thickened again, swallowing the path ahead until it looked like we were driving straight into a wall of light. The man in the middle row gripped the seat in front of him, muttering something over and over in a language I didn't recognize. His voice trembled, each word spilling out faster than the last. I reached for my phone again, even though I knew there would be no signal. This time the screen didn't even turn on. It was dead. The air inside the bus had grown heavier, pressing down on my chest. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears, quick and loud. Something shifted outside, a dark mass moving through the fog just ahead of us. It was huge, far taller than the bus, and it moved across the road with an impossible grace. The driver didn't slow down. When we passed the spot where it had been, the road beneath us changed again. The sound of the tires was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to come from everywhere at once. The woman in the front row opened her eyes, looked directly at me and said, "Don't look back." Her voice was so certain, so absolute, that I froze in place. My instinct screamed to glance behind me, but I kept my gaze forward. The scraping on the roof returned, moving faster now, like something was crawling along the bus toward the front. The hum outside deepened, vibrating through my bones. I tightened my grip on the armrest, realizing with sudden clarity that we were no longer on any road I recognized. The glowing mist had swallowed the world, and whatever lay ahead wasn't part of the city or any map at all. The driver's voice came again, low and almost inaudible over the sound. "No stops, no matter what you hear." The young man beside me leaned in. "What does he mean?" I didn't answer. I was too busy listening, because beneath the hum in the engine and the scraping above us, there was something else now. A knocking, slow, steady, coming from the outside of my window. The knocking grew louder. 3 sharp taps, a pause, then 3 more. It was too deliberate to be the wind, too steady to be random. I forced myself to look. Through the fog-smeared glass, a shape was pressed against the window. Not a hand exactly, but something long and thin, jointed in too many places, ending in sharp tips that scraped the glass. It tapped again, the sound sharp and metallic, before slowly sliding out of view. I tried to breathe, but the air inside the bus felt thick, like I was inhaling steam. The scraping on the roof had stopped. In its place came a different noise, a sound like hundreds of fingernails drumming softly, moving all along the sides of the bus. The man in the middle row suddenly stood and started pounding on the driver's partition. "Stop! Stop the bus!" His voice cracked in panic. The driver didn't move, didn't even look at him. That's when the bus began to slow on its own. The engine groaned, and the wheels crunched over something that wasn't road. I glanced out the front windshield. The glowing fog was thinning, and beyond it, I saw lights. Not street lights, lanterns, dozens of them, swaying from tall, crooked poles that lined a dirt path. The bus rolled forward until it came to a complete stop. The door hissed open with a long exhale of air. No one moved. The driver finally turned his head, just enough for me to see the edge of his profile. His mouth didn't move, but I swear I heard his voice directly in my ear. "Don't get out." Outside, between the lanterns, figures began to appear. They stepped into the light one by one. Tall, impossibly thin, their skins stretched tight over bones that seemed the wrong shape for a human body. Their faces were hidden behind masks carved from wood, each one painted with a different expression. Some smiling, some crying, some screaming. They didn't walk toward us. They just stood there, swaying gently in rhythm with the lanterns. The woman in the front row gripped her seatbelt and whispered, "It's them." The kid with the headphones leaned toward the aisle, his eyes wide. "Who?" Before she could answer, one of the masked figures stepped forward. It moved with a strange, jerking grace, like a marionette pulled by invisible strings. It stopped just short of the open bus door. Then, in a voice that was neither male nor female, it said, "One must come." No one spoke. The sound of the lanterns creaking in the wind filled the silence. The figure tilted its head toward the driver's seat. The driver didn't move. Then it looked directly at me. A chill ran down my spine so fast my whole body tensed. I shook my head, gripping the seat in front of me. Another masked figure stepped forward, this one taller, its mask painted entirely black with no features at all. It raised one long arm and pointed to the woman in the front row. Her eyes widened. She shook her head violently, whispering no over and over. Without warning, the air inside the bus shifted. A heavy, invisible force seemed to press in from all sides. My ears popped as though we were deep underwater. The woman's seatbelt snapped open on its own. She screamed and clutched the armrests, but her body began sliding toward the aisle, her feet dragging helplessly along the floor. The rest of us sat frozen, unable to move, as if our muscles had been locked. She was pulled down the steps and into the fog. The moment she vanished from sight, the pressure in the air lifted. I gasped for breath, my heart pounding so hard it hurt. The masked figures turned and slowly melted back into the mist, their lanterns fading until there was nothing left but the pale glow again. The bus door closed with a hiss. The driver gripped the wheel. Without a word, we started moving forward once more. No one spoke. The only sound was the hum beneath the bus and the faint tapping that had returned to my window, this time from the inside. The tapping from inside the glass didn't stop. It was slow, patient, almost playful, like whatever was doing it knew we couldn't run. I pressed myself back into the seat, staring straight ahead, refusing to look at the window. Outside, the fog began to swirl, curling into long tendrils that reached across the road like fingers. The headlights of the bus cut through just enough for me to see that we were no longer on dirt or a pavement or anything I could name. The ground beneath us was black. Not black like asphalt, but black like the absence of light itself. A flat emptiness that seemed to swallow the glow from our lamps. The hum outside deepened again, vibrating in my chest and rattling the windows. I glanced down the aisle. Every single passenger sat rigid in their seats, their faces pale and expressionless. The young man with the headphones had them back on, but they weren't plugged into anything. He was staring straight ahead, lips moving in silence. The driver leaned forward slightly, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. "Almost there," he murmured. "Almost where?" The fog broke suddenly, revealing something ahead. A towering gate that stretched up into the darkness, far higher than the bus itself. It was made of rusted iron bars, twisted into shapes I couldn't understand. Shapes that made my eyes hurt when I tried to follow them. The bus slowed, the brakes whining. On either side of the gate, tall shapes stood in the mist. Taller than the lantern figures from before, their heads brushing the black sky. They didn't move, didn't breathe. They only watched. The gates began to open on their own, metal grinding against metal. The sound so loud it felt like it was inside my skull. Beyond the gate, there was nothing. Not a road, not a landscape, not even fog. Just a vast, endless void. The driver looked into the rear-view mirror for the first time since we began this journey. I expected to see his face at last, but there was nothing there. The mirror reflected every seat, every passenger, except him. "We don't stop here," he said. "Not unless they take someone." My pulse hammered in my ears. "Who's they?" I whispered, though I wasn't sure if I wanted the answer. The bus rolled forward into the void. The moment we crossed the threshold, gravity seemed to shift. My stomach twisted violently, and for a second I thought we were falling. Not forward, but in every direction at once. The tapping at my window grew frantic, faster and faster, until it was a blur of sound. I turned my head before I could stop myself. Something was there, inside, pressed against the glass from within. It looked like me. Same face, same clothes, same wide, terrified eyes. It smiled, and its teeth were wrong. Before I could react, the lights inside the bus went out. In the pitch darkness, I heard the driver's voice, calm and steady. "Don't speak. Don't move. We'll get you through." Somewhere behind me, a seat creaked. Then another. Slow, deliberate footsteps moved down the aisle, passing row after row. They stopped right beside me. I held my breath. A cold hand rested gently on my shoulder. The lights flickered back on. There was nothing there. The bus kept moving forward into the nothingness, and I realized with a cold certainty that I had no idea if we were ever going back. The black void stretched endlessly in every direction. There was no horizon, no sense of movement, only the steady hum of the engine and the occasional flicker of the lights above us. I lost track of time. It could have been minutes or hours. Every now and then, I'd catch a glimpse of something moving outside. Shapes in the dark, gliding alongside the bus without making a sound. The driver never looked at them. I thought about the woman they took, about where she might be now. The fog returned without warning, curling in through the tiny gaps around the windows. It wasn't the pale gray from before. This fog was darker, almost oily, and it clung to my skin like it was alive. Somewhere ahead, a faint glow appeared. It wasn't a lantern. It was a doorway, a perfect rectangle of warm light, floating in the middle of the void. The driver slowed the bus. "This is where you get off," he said, not looking back. I stared at the door. "Where does it go?" He was silent for a long time. Then, not home, but somewhere. The bus door opened with its familiar hiss. The warm light from the doorway spilled inside, chasing the shadows back just a little. No one else moved. I stood, my legs trembling, and stepped into the aisle. As I walked toward the open door, I felt the same cold hand on my shoulder again. Only this time, it was guiding me forward. I stepped off the bus. The moment my feet left the metal steps, the sound of the engine vanished. The door closed behind me. I turned to look, but the bus was gone. Just me and the doorway. I hesitated, glancing over my shoulder into the endless dark. That's when I heard it, the faintest sound of tapping, somewhere far behind me. I stepped through the doorway. If you made it this far, you've already taken the ride. You've already been inside the Bone Library. Some stories you hear, some stories take you. And if you're still here, listening, you're one of us now. Subscribe to the Bone Library and keep the lights on tonight.